Welcome to the second tutorial for MooMu Modular. Today we are going to be looking at simple drum sequencing. Here you will see our final patch. If we press run on the clock sequencer, that will be our final product for the day. Right. So let's start our patch. First we will need to start a new patch. If we click on the Presets tab on the right-hand side, this will open up our browser. And in the toolbar at the top of the browser, we will click on the new icon. This has created a new patch. On the right-hand side, if we click on the Modules tab, this will open the Modules tab. This will open the modules where we can start searching for our desired modules. If we start searching for the clock module, we can drag and drop that into our patch. Now we want a trigger sequencer, so we can start searching for sequences. Finally, we are going to need our drum sampler module. Double-click on the search again. And drag out the drum sampler module over to the patch. And to tidy up, we will long press on our audio in-out module and drag to the end of our chain. The clock module may be a concept unfamiliar to users coming from a DAW background, where there is a timeline. Here we don't have a timeline. Instead, a series of trigger signals are used at regular intervals to synchronize events. We shall connect the 16th output of the clock module to the trigger input to drive the drum sequencer. For this, we shall be using blue cables. On the left-hand toolbar, select the colored jack socket and select the blue cable. To place the cable, place our finger over the 16th output on the clock module, start dragging the blue cable, and place the end on the trigger input on our sequencer. The trigger sequencer has 8 steps, where the interval of each step is determined by the clock. Here we have this set to 16th notes. The BPM can be adjusted on the clock module. When the module is initially placed in the patch, all steps are active. So each time a trigger is received, a trigger is generated at the output. The drum sample module has a collection of provided samples we can play. It contains both digital and classic drum sounds. The drum knob selects the family. If we turn this at the top, we can see we're currently on kicks, snares, hats, cymbals, claps, etc. We shall return this to the kick position. The sample knob changes what sound we are going to play. Again, we shall return the sample knob back to the original position. We will need to connect the output of the trigger sequencer and connect to the trigger input of the drum sample module. Our final connection, we will connect the audio output of the drum sample module to the audio in-out module. For this, we shall be using a red cable. On the left-hand toolbar, select the colored jack socket, then select the red cable, and drag a cable from the output of the drum sampler module to the audio in-out module. Now if we press run, we should hear a 16th note kick drum. I would encourage experimenting with the various different sounds and rhythms that can be produced. So, if we again press run on our sequencer, we can turn various steps on and off. This will give us varying patterns. And we can adjust the samples on the drum sampler like so. Once you have finished experimenting, we shall stop the clock from running. I shall adjust our sequencer, so we are merely playing kicks on the 4s. I shall adjust our drum sample to again be playing kicks, and select a drum sample of your liking. A kick on its own is not very interesting, so let's expand the patch to use multiple sounds. Before we add the second sound, let's add a Mixer 8 module to the second row, and move the audio in out module beside it. This will enable us to play multiple sounds. In the module browser, double-click on the search box and search for Mixer. Close the keyboard and drag the Mixer 8 module onto the bottom row. We will place the audio and out module beside the mixer. The current cable connected to the audio and out module can be moved to the first channel on the Mixer 8 module. We will connect the output of the mixer to the audio and out module. Now, if we press run, we shall hear our drums again. Now we are going to add a second drum sampler module and a second sequencer. We will use these for our snare sound. This time we won't use the module browser. What we shall do, click the X on the top right-hand corner to close our browser. We shall pan in our patch so we can see our top row. We shall select our Tigger sequencer module. You will notice the white border to indicate the selected module. In the left-hand toolbar, we will select the second clone option. This is clone with cables. This will duplicate the selected module and any input cables. We will also select our drum sampler module, where we'll use the top clone option. This will duplicate without any connected cables. We will change the steps we have selected on the sequencer. Like so. We will use a blue cable for a trigger that we can select in the left-hand toolbar. We will drag from the output of the second trigger sequencer to the trigger input on the second drum sampler module. Using the drum selection control, we will select a snare sound. Now we need to connect the audio. Again, on the left-handed toolbar, we will press the colored cable and select the red cable for audio. And we will drag a cable from the output of the second drum sampler module to the input on the second channel on the mixer. Now, if we press play on the clock module, we will hear our sequence. We will press run again to pause this sequence. The Mixer 8 module is an audio mixer. It has similar controls to its physical counterpart: level, pan, high-pass filter, 2 auxiliary, and mute, all per channel. Each channel on the mixer combines all the input signal channels to a stereo signal. This is then affected, mixed with the other channels and sent to the outputs. If we press run again on our clock module, we will hear our patch play. But unless we have been very lucky, our 2 sequences will be out of synchronization. To fix this, we will use reset signals from the toolbar. Select a blue cable, because these are triggers. We will connect the reset input on both of the trigger sequences to the reset output on the clock module. Now on the clock module, if we stop our sequence, then click reset, then click run. We will notice both our sequences are synchronized, as you should hear the pattern as expected. Next, we will add our final sound, a hi-hat sound. We will use the same techniques we have used before. We will select the second trigger sequencer on the top row. Then we will select Clone with cables on the toolbar, the second clone option. That will copy our sequencer over with the trigger and the reset already connected. We will then select the second drum sampler module, and we will use the top clone option on the toolbar. This is the drum sample module we shall use for our hi-hats. If we take the drum control, we shall adjust that until it says hats in the top row of the wave display. We will need to connect the trigger output of the new sequencer to the hi-hat drum sample module like so. And we will need to connect a red audio cable, again selecting that from the left-hand toolbar. We will drag a cable from the output of the drum sample module and connect to the input on the third row of the mixer, like so. We will change the pattern on this trigger sequencer. We will do a simple off hi-hat pattern, like such. We will click Reset on the clock module, and we will press Run. We can experiment with the hi-hat sound we want to use by adjusting the second control on the drum sampler module. Experiment with these sounds and select any you wish. We now have all the sounds in our patch. We have come a long way in this tutorial, but the beat could be improved by adding some accent notes where some hits are louder than others. The drum sequencer module has an input for just this. We will need an additional sequencer to provide the triggers for these accent notes. Select the last trigger sequencer on the top row. And again, we will use Clone with cables, the second clone option on the toolbar. We will simply turn off all the hits except the last hit in the bar will have an accent on it. We will need to connect a blue cable, selected from the toolbar. We will need to connect the output of our last trigger module to the accent input of the hats drum sampler module. The control next to the accent input controls the amount of difference an accent has. We shall turn this counterclockwise to 9 o'clock so the difference is apparent. On the clock module, we will press Reset, then Run. We can hear the second hat hit is much louder than the first. We are nearly there, but this beat will sound better when it is placed in some time and space. For this, we will use reverb and delay. Select the Mixer 8 module, pan the patch until the mixer is in the center of the screen. Then open up the module browser. Double-click the search box. The first module we are going to place is the delay. Double-click the delay module to place it in the patch. Double-click back in the search box to reset. Search for reverb. For this, we will use the plate reverb. So double-click the module and click on the X in the top right-hand corner to close the module browser. We will use these by assigning them to the auxiliary send and returns, the same as you would on a physical mixer. We will use red cables for this, so on the toolbar select the colored jack, then the red cable. On the mixer module, we have 2 auxiliary rows, A and B. We will take the send out from the A row and connect this to the input of the delay. The return will connect to the output of the delay. For row B, we will connect the send output to the input of the reverb and connect the return to the output. Let's start by adding some delay. We will need to sync our clock for this. The BPM output of the clock is a control voltage, so we will use a green cable. We will connect the BPM output of the clock module to the time input on the delay module. We will turn the small attenuverter full clockwise. This will now sync out delay with the clock. For this, we are going to use a simple 1/8 delay. If we adjust the time control clockwise and look at the top of the screen, we will set the value being adjusted. Set this to a value close to 1.0. We now have an 1/8 delay. We will also need to turn the dry-wet control to the fully wet position, so we don't have any of the dry signal returned. On the clock module, click Reset, then Run. Our patch will start playing. Remember, auxiliary row A is connected to our delay. Channel 3 is our hi-hats. If we slowly increase return A, we will hear an 1/8 delay on our hi-hat. Press Run on the clock module to pause our patch. The final step is to add reverb. Let's set our module up first. First, we need to turn the dry knob all the way down to 0. Leaving out wet knob at 12 o'clock. We will reduce the decay ever so slightly. Now if we press Run, on auxiliary row B on channel 2, which is our snare drum, we will start to turn up the control, introducing the reverb effect. We can apply this to all our samples. We have learned a lot in this tutorial. The concept of a clock, trigger sequences, and setting up a mixer with audio effects. We have used the small but effective Seek-Oct trigger modules. These have many uses. In our next tutorial, we shall be covering the full-screen drum sequencer designed for jamming. For more about MooMu Modular, click like and subscribe.